In this pod-slice summary of the Diary of a CEO podcast, Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned expert on addiction, trauma, childhood development, and stress, discusses how repression of emotion, particularly anger, can have detrimental effects on an individual's health. Most notably, he maintains emotionally repressed individuals are more likely to develop cancer. Repression, he argues, is also a significant consequence of childhood trauma. As an illustration, Dr. Mate refers to Prince Harry, who was severely traumatized by the death of his mother. Harry was told of the event in a manner that gave no room for the expression of his grief and emotions, a factor that likely contributed to his later struggles with mental health. Moreover, Dr. Mate delves into personal anecdotes. He talks about a period when he was feeling particularly anxious and troubled, as he was excessively self-critical after delivering a talk to a large audience. He also recalls an interaction with Prince Harry, where he felt he had compromised his principles by agreeing to a format that required viewers to purchase a book in order to watch the interview. Further, Dr. Mate shares about his fraught relationship with the internet. He decided to disconnect for 2 weeks, an act he found particularly transformative, as it helped reduce his inner turmoil and sense of compulsion to seek external validation. Additionally, Dr. Mate talks about his struggles with his own advice as portrayed by his book, When the Body Says No. Despite recognizing the wisdom in his teachings, he admits to often falling short, leading to periods of stress and disconnection. In a conversation about how the media misrepresented him during his interaction with Prince Harry, he vividly details his sense of anguish at not being seen or heard accurately, a trait he traces back to his childhood experiences. Yet he explains that through insight gained from a friend, he could distance himself from external perceptions, helping him regain his sense of equilibrium. This podcast covers a wide range of contemplations about mental health, values, personal growth, and the human response to trauma. It is filled with Dr. Mate's wisdom drawn from his professional expertise and personal explorations. Dr. Gabor Mate delves deeper into his discussions about trauma, discussing that it doesn't necessarily require a horrific event. He emphasizes that individuals, especially children, can be traumatized through seemingly innocuous situations, such as not being seen, heard, or held. He talks about the need for nurturing human touch, using examples from studies on rat grooming and preterm infants, comparing the trauma of Prince Harry to the trauma a child might experience in a dysfunctional family. Dr. Mate underscores that trauma is often about unmet needs rather than catastrophic events. He illustrates this by pointing out how Harry was told about his mother's death in a stark, unemotional manner, which left him bereft of the emotional support he needed at that moment. Mate also addresses how being successful at a young age can create dilemmas of trust, not knowing if people approach you genuinely or to benefit from your success. He talks about the importance of reconnecting with gut feelings, which are natural instincts that alert us about danger or safety. He argues that childhood trauma interferes with this connection between gut feeling and the brain, causing people to act more from intellect than instinct. Continuing to reflect on his personal life, Dr. Mate discusses how he originally believed he was immune to stress, a belief that persisted up until his 40s. He equates his prior conviction that he could not feel stress to being in denial. In retrospect, he realized that his coping strategies like working hard, gaining status, and striving for attention were simply masking the underlying stress. Further, he also provides insights into his relationship with his wife during his dark times. Dr. Mate candidly talks about how he expected his wife to absorb his stress and often blamed her when he was unhappy. He points out that this dynamic was not one-sided, and his wife, too, was conditioned from her own childhood to be a peacemaker and a caregiver. In their shared journey of growth, Dr. Mate and his wife have had to unlearn these patterns and learn to take care of their own emotional needs. Discussing the prevalence of autoimmune diseases, Dr. Mate notes how women are overrepresented in these statistics, probably because they tend to suppress healthy anger, bear responsibilities beyond their capacity, and prioritize others' emotional needs over their own. He attributes this gender disparity to societal conditioning in a patriarchal setup. Dr. Mate firmly stresses that recognizing and addressing these deeply ingrained patterns is crucial for personal growth and emotional well-being. In this installment of the podcast, Dr. Gabor Mate's insightful discussion continues. He focuses on relationships and how trauma can impact them, with a candid account of his own marriage. He reveals how he expected his wife to provide soothing comfort, unconsciously seeking motherly nurturing that he thinks many men tend to do. This dynamic, he argues, can drain the sexual passion out of a relationship as men unconsciously demand their partners to mother them, and women often take on this role due to how society has conditioned them. Such a dynamic doesn't just lead to relationship issues, but can also affect women's health. According to Dr. Mate, many women's cancers and autoimmune diseases can be traced back to self-depression. He proposes that when a woman isn't strong enough to stand up to this dynamic of mothering their partner, the body may express resistance through sickness. Further, there's a discussion about the cost of self-repression. It's not only emotionally damaging, but it also disrupts the immune system. Dr. Mate shows how healthy anger made to be repressed can impair immunity, making the body prone to illnesses like autoimmune diseases and cancer. Dr. Mate details the connection between the immune system and the emotional system. He explains that both systems have the same role: to keep out what's unhealthy and let in what is beneficial. Notably, he indicates that these two are not merely interconnected, but are effectively one system. Thus, suppressing your emotional system simultaneously suppresses your immune system. Next, the conversation turns to childhood traumas, with Dr. Mate highlighting the contrast and often conflict between the need for authenticity and the need for attachment. When children are unable to express authenticity to maintain an attachment, they disconnect from their genuine self, an event often seen as traumatic. This issue, he insists, is a key problem for many adults who continue to be people pleasers, constantly seeking approval at the cost of their own authenticity. In conclusion, Dr. Mate's in-depth discussion about trauma reveals how it is not just catastrophic circumstances, but also relationships, societal expectations, and suppressed emotions that can lead to physical illnesses. Essential topics include the connection between emotional suppression and immune system dysfunction, and how the struggle between authenticity and attachment can result in lifelong emotional challenges. Dr. Mate, building on the connection between health and emotional repression, particularly the loss of authenticity, explores being nice. He largely attributes the societal norm of being nice to a fear of not being loved, accepted, or appreciated by others. He bases this on the observation that certain illness entities such as multiple sclerosis and ALS have been noticed amongst people who suppress their anger and put others before themselves constantly. Dr. Mate shares a revealing story about speaking to a support group of MS patients about the potential correlation between their desire to please others and their health. He found that these patients strongly resonated with this hypothesis and confirmed their difficulty in saying no. This difficulty illustrates the repression of their boundary defense and a disconnection from their true selves. Further, Dr. Mate emphasizes that the drive to please others is often born out of a primal fear of losing loved ones' affection, thereby compelling individuals to constantly put others before themselves, which could be a Herculean task. In doing so, people compromise their health due to the stressful burden of upholding everyone else's expectations. To alter this habit of perpetual pleasing, Dr. Mate offers an exercise. He suggests asking oneself where in their life they're not saying no. This will uncover the underlying belief that if one says no, they will be perceived negatively, impairing their self-worth. Further, recognizing the origin of this belief can help, usually derived from childhood experiences where expressing disagreement was potentially frowned upon. Dr. Mate argues that coming to terms with these truths and learning to assert one's authentic selves might lead to losing some relationships, but will also eventually attract more sincere, genuine relationships, emphasizing that choosing the pain of losing inauthentic relationships is preferred over the pain of losing oneself. Moreover, Dr. Mate extrapolates this theory of personal trauma to a social and collective level. He suggests that recognizing trauma would require societies to confront their dark histories of oppressing and traumatizing other communities, demonstrating that trauma isn't just an individual issue, but a societal, historical, and collective matter. Dr. Mate dives deep into our healthcare systems and their under-acknowledgement of the emotional contributors to ill health. He criticizes the significant gap between science and research and the real-world practice of medicine regarding the mind-body connection and the impacts of trauma. Dr. Mate calls for the education of caregivers about this science. He encourages physicians to ask patients about their emotional well-being in addition to treating their physical ailments. He pivots towards the value of prevention, supporting young families, considering the stress levels of parents, and its direct impact on children's well-being. Uncertainty, lack of control, and lack of information drive physiological stress. In response, let's aim for mutual acceptance and social support. Schools, Dr. Mate suggests, should be sanctuaries of emotional support. Rather than punishing misbehavior, understanding the root cause of these behaviors, often stemming from home troubles, is more effective. Then, extending this perspective, he emphasizes the importance of understanding childhood development and trauma in legal and educational systems. Looking into healing and recovery, he stresses that overall, it's about unearthing our true selves, reminding us that nobody is broken or damaged goods. Being aware of our trauma empowers us, allowing us to contextualize our reactions and responses. An interesting segment followed, where he distinguishes between healthy anger and rage. Healthy anger defends boundaries and dissipates once it accomplishes its purpose. In contrast, rage recruits more brain circuits, building on itself until it spirals out of control. A fit of anger, similar to an epileptic fit. Through a case study, Dr. Mate highlighted how invalidation in childhood can lead to long-lasting rage. Additionally, both repressed anger and rage can lead to heart issues, making it even more crucial to understand and manage anger healthily. He commends people seeking help with childhood psychologists to better understand themselves, helping to prevent these fits of anger and allowing them to live healthier lives. From addressing trauma and its systemic roots, we now explore individual coping mechanisms and the role anger plays in our lives. He presents an informative blend, addressing societal systems and individual struggles, guiding towards understanding and greater self-awareness. Dr. Mate addresses the importance of feeling seen and understanding yourself. He shares his personal journey rooted in his harsh childhood experiences during the Nazi invasion of Budapest. Not being recognized as a human by the Nazis and, in a desperate bid for survival handed over to a stranger by his mother, instilled in him a deep desire to be seen. This profound personal experience underscores his understanding that we all seek validation, and the inability to see oneself fully can lead to feelings of anxiety and self-doubt. Turning to practical solutions, Dr. Mate suggests self-connection could be achieved through practicing mindfulness and meditation. He recommends simple acts, such as taking a few conscious breaths throughout the day. He warns, though, of our widespread attachment to social media and our habit of seeking validation through others' online approval, which can lead to further self-alienation and stress. Also in conversation, Stephen Bartlett highlights the detrimental impact of constant exposure to stresses and stimuli in our modern world. It's causing, although in a mild form, chronic stress. Dr. Mate acknowledges this as a widespread normality in today's society, but one that has severe health consequences. He reminds us that it is only normal if that's what we accept as a societal norm. Transparent and healthy relationships, Dr. Mate argues, come when we are comfortable with ourselves. He reiterates that we must not expect others to fill the voids within us. Instead, individuals should seek truthful relationships focused on mutual growth. As the conversation progresses to romantic relationships, Dr. Mate explains that the relationship he shares with his wife, Ray, has been his most significant grounding force, allowing growth and authenticity. Looking at the broader societal picture, he observes that when there is a mismatch in emotional development between partners as one evolves, the relationship often faces a crossroad. He brings an insightful perspective into the challenges modern couples face, especially when their caring energies are distributed unevenly, often strained with the arrival of children. The intense discussion continues, providing a nuanced overview of relationships, anxiety, self-awareness, and the stress that our increasingly connected world imposes on us. Continuing the discussion, the topic shifts to the complexity of intimacy in relationships, specifically the disconnection in the bedroom. Dr. Mate points out how we tend to enter into physical intimacy before emotional intimacy, leading to a system where sex becomes divorced from our genuine needs, becoming mechanical rather than integrally personal. He notes that in relationships, especially for many women, emotional intimacy often precedes physical desire. He cautions that when relationships adopt a parenting dynamic, it places a damper on sexual drive, and notes how such dynamics exist across various kinds of relationships and gender identities. As the conversation drifts to the societal perception of sex, Dr. Mate highlights the negative impact of glorifying distorted perceptions of sexuality. Casting an ambivalent light on famous sex symbols like Marilyn Monroe, he points to her history of abuse and trauma, questioning the ideals we cherish. He shares a crucial insight into women's sexuality, stating how for many women, safety is essential. Dr. Mate segues into a more somber point, discussing how the pressures of modern society have led to an increasing rate of distress, confusion, and childhood suicide, accompanied by increasing medication for children and adults. He makes an alarming observation: the rise in numbers of people medicated in the US and Europe, foretelling a growing epidemic of distress across the globe because of a toxic culture. Despite this grim viewpoint, he still harbors optimism for humanity, believing in our capacity for growth, transformation, and reaching sanity. Switching back to Stephen Bartlett, as he shares his aspirations, Dr. Mate advises him to identify activities distinguishing his goals into those which support or undermine them. He highlights that intentions need to be evident not just in statements, but also in how one lives, indicating that internal goals are just as important as external ones. Dr. Mate suggests Bartlett consider inner peace in his goal mix. Dr. Mate closes this segment talking about how suffering can serve as a teacher. Citing the Chinese word for crisis, which posits danger with opportunity, he proposes that it is through the inevitable hardships of life and our reactions to them that we can grow. Continuing, the discourse goes deeper into the idea of vulnerability, drawing attention to its essentiality in growth, both physically and emotionally. According to Dr. Mate, our society has developed ways to deny, shut down, or distract ourselves from our vulnerability, which stunts our emotional development and leads us to lose touch with ourselves. Recognizing and acknowledging one's vulnerability allows room for growth and connection with others. Stephen Bartlett affirms this, understanding that his openness and willingness to be vulnerable has enabled him to have meaningful conversations on his podcast. In a personal and thoughtful segment, Dr. Mate answers a traditionally asked question about his last day on Earth, calling for unconditional love and expressing gratitude. He expresses gratitude towards the person he loves the most without needing to specify why, and shares that gratitude with the world, thanking it for all the struggles and lessons learnt. Considering his legacy, Dr. Mate wants to be remembered as someone who made a difference, the evidence of which he sees through countless messages from around the world. His work, he claims, has helped people reconnect with themselves, rescuing them from feelings of damage and brokenness and leading them to discover their capacity for wholeness. Mirroring Dr. Mate's sentiments, Bartlett notes that children serve as great teachers, provided we are open to learning. Their raw, unfiltered view of the world provides avenues for enlightened understanding. As an ending note, Bartlett gives a mention to the next generation of teachers and therapists, indicating how much of their work would be influenced by thinkers like Dr. Mate, with an aim for generational healing, thereby effecting a counter to generational trauma. Lastly, the sponsors segment introduces Whoop, an AI-based health and fitness brand that synthesizes personal data to provide health and fitness recommendations, emphasizing how technology can be used to better our lives. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.